Good morning, business and professional communication students. Today's lecture will cover Chapter 6 and 7 of the textbook. Chapter 6 focuses on the principles of interviewing, and Chapter 7 focuses on specific types of interviewing. The purpose, in addition to going over the two chapters, of the purpose of this lecture is also to help you incorporate this information and tailor it to your Group 2 assignment. Of course, one of the requirements of the Group 2 team presentation is for you and your team to conduct an interview with a member of the management team of the company that you are conducting the communication assessment on. So as I discuss these chapters, particularly as I discuss Chapter 6, I will help identify points that connect to the Team 2 assignment. Of course, this lecture also relates to interviewing as a general professional activity that all of you will engage in beyond this assignment and just throughout your professional career. So let's get started. Chapter 6, Interviewing, Principles of Interviewing. Obviously, an interview is one type of conversation that you have with another person. There are some specific characteristics of an interview, however, that distinguish the interview from a general conversation that you'd have with a friend or family member. The interview is very purposeful, it's focused. Therefore, there's a higher degree of control, preparation that needs to go into the interview. The interview includes at least 2 parties, and the amount of speaking is managed differently than the amount of speaking that goes into a regular conversation. There are many different types of interview characteristics, but these are some of the general ones. A major difference or a major characteristic of the interview is that it is planned. Much of your time relating to an interview happens before you actually meet with the person you're interviewing, who is known as the interviewee. So part of planning for your interview entails defining a specific interview goal. It is necessary that you and your team for this upcoming assignment, communication assessment assignment, that you have a clear idea of the information goal you have before you make arrangements to sit down with a member of the management team. So you need to define and clarify your goal and be very crystal clear about this goal. Exactly what type of information are you trying to find out? In the context of your upcoming assignment, of course, the goal, you have 2 goals. One, to find out information about the internal communication systems of the company. In other words, how do they communicate among themselves within the site, within the company? So in other words, how many meetings do they have? What are their major channels for communicating between and among supervisors and employees? How do employees communicate with other employees? Do they primarily use email? Do they primarily use telephone, etc.? So one of your interview goals for the upcoming assignment is to find out information about the internal communication systems of the company. A second goal would be, of course, to find out the external communication systems of the company. In other words, what are the primary ways that this company or this organization communicates with the public? What is their public face? So what type? Are they involved in social media? Do they have a website? Is the website regularly maintained? How effective is their website in driving traffic to their business, etc.? What kind of feedback do they get from people on their external communication systems? So that's an example of a goal. As you are planning your interview, which all of you should be planning your interviews at this point, you definitely want to clarify and define your interview goal. Another thing you want to know, once you find out who the specific person is that you will conduct the interview with, you will need to identify and analyze that person, that interviewee. You will need to make sure that your questions are appropriate for his or her knowledge level. You will need to get an idea of their concept of themselves and make sure that they're aware of the types of questions that you will be asking in general. You should also get some idea about if their willingness, what they see their role is in the company. For sure, you want to interview a person who sees him or herself as being a vital and important member of their business team. Okay, and you also, it would be helpful to know again if they're willing and what their general attitude is towards participating, because you also want someone who's willing to conduct the interview so that they can be both forthright and thorough in answering the questions that you have prepared. Another part of planning the interview is to prepare a list of topics that you want to ask about. You want to choose the best and most appropriate interview structure. Some interviews are highly structured. Some are not structured at all, meaning it's like a free-flowing conversation. For this communication assessment assignment, your interviews will need to be moderately structured, meaning that you will go in with a list of questions, and you will also have flexibility in maybe changing the sequence of the questions, or maybe not even answering some of the questions, or adding, and and during the interview you may have flexibility of adding questions that you had not thought about before. So your interview questions or format, your interview format will need to be moderately structured for this assignment. Considering possible questions, you and your teammates have already started that process of considering potential questions, and this is a very important process. First, you identify a range of questions, and then you go through and edit and select the most appropriate questions given the time frame that you will have. Your interview will need to take place in about between 20 and 25 minutes, so this is a fairly short interview. So the better your questions, the more meaningful and fruitful your interview will be. When designing questions, you want to establish primary and secondary questions, as well as follow-up questions, as I sent out in the announcement on Monday. You want a combination of open and closed questions. Open questions are don't have a specific answer. Closed questions do. You want to make sure that your questions also have a combination of factual and opinion questions. So, for example, actually most of your questions for this upcoming assignment will need to be factual, but factual facts that you cannot find on the website. So you never want to ask questions of an interviewee that can be found out, that the answers to those questions can be found out from, for example, a basic website or Google search on the company. So an example of such a question that would be inappropriate use of time during an interview is how old is your organization, or how long has how many employees do you have, or how many locations do you have. That type of information can usually be found out from a general quick research on Google or a visit to the company's website or by visiting beforehand and picking up a brochure. Make sure your questions, list of questions have a combination of direct and indirect questions, hypothetical and critical incidents or case study type questions. Okay. Of course, you're going to arrange a time beforehand and get permission to conduct the interview. When you send an email or make the phone call requesting the interview, be sure to find out the time of day that works for the interviewee, and be sure to let the interviewee know that there will be 2 members of your team coming for the interview. I definitely suggest that you, instead of having 1 person from your team conduct the interview, that 2 people plan to attend and participate in the interview. 1 primarily as a recorder and a note taker, and that way if there was anything left out that maybe the interviewing person, primary interviewer, didn't notice, that the second person can kind of add it at the end and get the information that might be helpful to your team. So I suggest you have 2 people plan. I don't suggest that you have any more than that because you don't want to make the interviewee feel overwhelmed or outnumbered by having 3 or 4 people come to interview the person. For the most part, your interviews will take place on site at the company so that it's a time and location that works for the interviewee. Of course, you want to request a space that's pretty distraction-free and quiet for the duration of the interview, which again should take between 20 and 25 minutes. Conducting the interview. Now you have planned for the interview. Now you're at the stage of actually meeting and conducting the interview with the person. During your opening, the opening has certain functions that you want to make sure it fulfills. You want to greet the person, build a rapport. You will already have conducted some basic background information on the person in terms of their title, their role in the company, etc. You want to give a brief orientation. Let the person know during this meeting, during this interview, our goal is to find out more about your communication systems, how you communicate internally within the company, and also how you communicate externally with the public. And so you want to let them know a little about the reason for your interview and kind of set the interviewee's expectations about the type of questions that they should expect to answer. Okay. Ground rules should be shared during the very beginning and opening of the interview, meaning if you should let them know that you are looking to conduct the interview in about 20 minutes. So you should give them, again, set their expectations. You want to let them know that reiterate that this is a part of a class project and is designed to assist the company in finding out about ways to strengthen their internal and external communication systems, as well as it's an opportunity for you as students and your team as a student team to apply some of the concepts you learned in business and professional communication class to a real life organization. So you can let them know a little about your motivation during the opening of the interview. During the interview, there are many things that will be taking place. You will obviously be engaged with the interviewee, and you want to focus your body. As the interviewer, you want to focus and control your body language and focus your attention and energy on the interviewee. Obviously, you're not going to stare and kind of drain the interviewee and make him or her feel uncomfortable. You do, however, want to be active and listening actively with your eye contact, your facial expression, your posture oriented towards the person, and demonstrating and looking like you're listening, taking notes perhaps, and of course the second person will be taking more notes and recording. One thing I definitely need to add for the opening, be sure to ask for permission to record on a cell phone, to conduct some type of audio recording either on a cell phone or on a computer, and get that permission recorded. If the person is not does not grant permission for the interview to be recorded, that is fine. The second person can take notes and go the traditional route of taking notes and highlights from the interview. Okay. During the interview, you want to probe for information. This is a fact-finding mission. So elaborate, ask the interviewee to elaborate on things that you're not sure about. Ask the interviewee to clarify, paraphrase, what the interviewee has shared to ensure that you have accurate understanding. And, use silence if you need to try to just take a moment to process what was said and rephrase your question if needed as well. Now, during the interviewee, during this particular interview, this particular assignment, you will be the interviewee. But many times throughout your profession, you will be, let me back up. During this assignment, you will be the interviewer. Many times, however, during your professional career, you will be the interviewee, the person being interviewed. And you always want to listen actively when you're being interviewed, give clear, detailed answers, correct any misunderstandings, and cover your agenda in terms of whatever you want to convey about yourself or your company during the interview. As the interviewer, you will need to close the interview by reviewing and clarifying the key findings or results. You want to let the interviewee know what you plan to do with the information. So, for example, as you close the interview, you should let the interviewee know that you plan as a team to write up a report about the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities in terms of the company's communication systems, and that you plan to share that report with the company electronically at the end of the semester. So you definitely want to let them know that, and to also thank them and conclude with pleasantries and appreciation for the opportunity to learn more about the inner communication workings of their company. An interview requires ethical behavior on the part of both interviewers and interviewees. So you only want to make sure that you make promises that you're able to keep. So, for example, the main promise that you need to make for the upcoming assignment is to promise that you will share the report or findings from your team about the company's communication strengths and opportunities. And obviously, if there are times when private information is shared or information about persons who work in the company get shared during the interview, you want to keep those confidences, and you don't want to breach anything the interviewee has asked you not to share. You want to make sure to respect those wishes as well. Allow interviewees to respond freely. Don't, make the environment hostile. This is a voluntary situation they're engaging in, and you want to always treat every interviewee with respect, of course. Don't misrepresent facts of your position. Don't waste the interviewer's time. One way you can demonstrate appreciation for the interviewer's time is, of course, being well prepared.